The week that was on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north off the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway. Call now, get some Lynette's.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. My name is Saeed Khan, always happy to host. We are joined with some wonderful regulars, and at the expense of saying that they're irregulars, we got some new people on today for us as well. We have Adolph Mongo, author, former journalist, political consultant, and host of Detroit in Black and White on 910 AM radio. Welcome, Adolph. We also have Geoffrey Fieger, senior partner at the law firm of Fieger, Kenny and Harrington. Geoffrey is also a occasional legal commentator on NBC and MSNBC and was gubernatorial candidate on the Democratic side in 1998. Welcome, Geoffrey.
Thanks. I'm more of an irregular. Although I had a colonoscopy this morning and I'm very regular right now.
Duly noted. Okay. So, I think for the rest of us who might be a bit more, if we sound stuffed up, well, you're going to have to forgive us. We have with us, of course, one of our regulars, now fully over her jet lag from her recent international sorties, Nancy Derringer, columnist for Deadline Detroit. Hi, Nancy.
Hi. And
of course, always manning the rudder of the ship, the editor of Deadline Detroit, we've got Allan Lengel.
Hello. All right.
So there has been a lot going on this week, and particularly here in the good old US of A, that I thought we could go ahead and unpack. And of course, at the end, we will have our usual Schmuck of the week. Starting off, though, let's go with Detroit. And what an exciting election we've had here. Certainly, when it comes to new phases, three Muslim American mayors, Dearborn Heights, and Hamtramck, so they were able to pull a hat trick. But we also had Mayor Duggan gliding to an easy victory. He actually, though, did very little to encourage any talk on the issues. As you might remember, he even refused to debate his opponent. Is this going to be the way that it is now? I mean, did he marginalize more citizens by doing that than courting them?
Lengel, you take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of disgraceful that he didn't at least take one debate in. I mean, I get it. You're ahead by so much. You say, I don't need to do 3 debates. It's a waste of time. But I think at least one debate to kind of talk about the issues to be confronted by. I mean, we saw his billboards all around the city. It would just say, like, 5,000 new jobs or whatever it is, so many new parks. I mean, it was the most benign campaign and he killed it. And so I think it was a disservice. He successfully minimized his opponent, but he also, marginalized the citizens of Detroit.
I mean, if you paid attention to the media, which I do, you would not have even known there was a mayoral race other than the fact that occasionally there'd be a story on it. But I don't know why you think that's surprising. In 1998, Engler would not debate me.
Oh, yeah.
And the only way that you can ever, under those situations, do anything about it is have the press start complaining loudly and shaming the other candidate. So it's not a new tactic, but that wasn't the issue. I mean, the issue is that he basically ignored his opponent. He literally did not conduct a campaign. Right. And there's a certain inertia that allowed him to be reelected, regardless of the issues, regardless of whether he does a good job. The fact is he doesn't do a bad job. So when faced with somebody who's not apparently doing a horrible job or isn't being sentenced to 38 years in federal penitentiary, aka Kwame, I guess the electorate of
28.
the city of Detroit is just complacent and will elect
Right.
anyone who's there as long as they don't offend them.
Right.
Well, you had a candidate who didn't do anything, got in the race 6 months before the primary, didn't have an organization, didn't have the money. What do you expect? And all he did was complain about, well, the media is not covering me. Well, you know, you have to get your agenda out there on the table. No one knew what Anthony Adams stood for. And people was comfortable with Mike Duggan. You see him every day on TV, ribbon cutting, making announcements, etc. He didn't even have to campaign. He didn't even break a sweat in this one.
Can I just say
even got remarried and all of that, so that there's some publicity.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, two things, one quick and point and one longer one. I observed the 1998 Michigan gubernatorial campaign as a resident of the adjacent state of Indiana, and based on what I saw of Jeff Fieger on the air, I wouldn't have debated him either because he would have made mincemeat out of John Engler. But the other thing I want to say is that I was on a different show, which I won't mention, and somebody made this point. And I think it was a valid one. A lot of the reason that there was no debate falls on the local media, who have failed to put together.
That's exactly right.
Yes, who have failed to put together a consortium similar to the one that holds the presidential debates. I forget what it's called. I can't summon it up, but we all know what it is. It's essentially like a loose affiliation, a herding cats kind of organization that decides on the rules and decides on who's going to ask the questions, and essentially lays it at the feet of the candidates. And it's much harder to say goodbye to that or to say no to that than it is to say a lot of no's to 4 different TV stations and 2 newspapers and and us. And
but there's
no
media. I think we discussed this before. There's no media. Even when I ran for governor, there was a significant contingent of media that was stationed in Lansing. Now, if you check out the Lansing media contingent covering the state of Michigan, I think there's 1 or 2 people. There used to be, 10, 20 people. The local media, i.e. the city of Detroit, the biggest city in this state, is virtually non-existent. It's entertainment media. The news media does not exist other than but it always sought ratings, but it also did it under the guise of providing a legitimate journalistic purpose. And now I don't think there's any guise of journalistic purpose. I just think it's pure entertainment, and journalists be damned. I don't think they exist in the statewide media at all. True journalists.
I will say, Violet Economova for our staff really kicked some ass during this election and really brought out a lot of issues and stuff like that. But we're a small organization. I mean, we did far more, I think, than any other publication, and that still was not enough. It's the problem is people scream about, we want more media, we want more coverage, we want better more information, and the problem is people don't want to pay for it, and that's a dilemma.
And I mean, this is 10 shows. We have 10 shows worth of content on that.
Well, the media, especially the electronic media, they went and got these $10 an hour reporters who do not know the community. They don't know the community. They don't know the history of what they're covering. And we used to have organizations like the League of Women Voters, those kind of organizations, who demanded debates, etc. And you don't have that anymore. It's just everybody on their own. And here you had a candidate that had $2 million, and the other one had $2, and that's what you got.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I got a question for Adolph.
I was going to say, I mean, in 1998, Jeff, I mean, you ran a campaign that didn't have social media yet. I mean, it barely had the internet. I mean, I would imagine that if you were frozen out by traditional media sources, you would have been able to get your message out, even if it was debating an empty chair, which Clint Eastwood tried to do.
Yes and no, but people pay a lot of attention to message too. I don't know how many people really. I don't understand the message anymore. They keep saying messages are important, but but back then, even though there wasn't social media, as long as you were funded, and I was funded primarily by myself, you could get the message out by virtue of commercials, which is the same way you do it now. I'm just always curious about this claim that the voting public is interested in the message and the plan and the platform of the candidates. Because to me, that doesn't explain how Trump gets elected and how these idiots continually get elected. I think if you put it, the way this country is run, I think that may be true for Democrats. I think all you have to do as a Republican is put an R next to your name. You don't have to have absolutely any platform. You don't have to have any brains in your skull. I think it could happen in this state. I think that Chief Craig could put an R next to his name, and if Whitmer is unpopular enough among people who think she shouldn't have protected us against COVID, notwithstanding the fact that he's a dunce, that he could win an election without anything other than an R next to his name. Because on the one hand, there's committed apparatchiks who are just vote in lockstep for the letter R. And it doesn't appear to be anything but that. And the R really stands, they can't even spell. Actually, they can spell, because the R really stands for racism. That's I'm always
throwing those bombs out there, aren't you?
Colin Powell couldn't stomach it anymore. It is so clear that the present Republican Party, their entire agenda is racism, and their entire base is racist. And I don't care what anybody else says. Why people don't talk more about that? It starts and ends with racism.
Is this a segue?
Simple.
Is this a segue to the Virginia the Virginia governor's election?
Yeah,
we'll get to that, Nancy. But first of all, I have to say the views of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Headline Detroit.
Well,
Alan,
if it doesn't, I don't know what does. Because I mean, racism is so obviously the driving agenda in this. Defund the police. Who wants to? Not one single black person wants to defund the police. Nobody knows what, and it's not even taught in schools. I don't know what critical race theory is, but they're all code words for black people. It's just a code word for black people.
It don't replace names like Detroit. You don't have to say the N word anymore. No. You just say some of those things. And you're right, Jeff. You're right. Look at the clerk, the former clerk in Macomb County. Got elected. Nobody knew who she was. She was insane.
She was a mentally ill lunatic.
Right. They had to get rid of her. She was a thief.
Right. A mentally ill, homeless lunatic.
And now they got the coward of the county running for governor.
Right. How did that happen? With an R next to her name. Now, that's a great story. I think we should be watching that story. How did a mentally ill, homeless woman get elected the clerk of Macomb County simply by having an R next to her name? That's unbelievable.
All right.
Well, I was who had reference to Kenny Rogers in the first 10 minutes of the show on their bingo card? Alan, I think you had a question for Adolph.
Well, I had a question actually for both Adolph and Fieger. Was both you guys were able to get a lot of attention in you Adolph with the campaign for Coleman, And Jeff, you got a lot of publicity, and look, if Nancy's in Indiana and she knew about the race, what did you guys do to get the word out there with, you know?
Listen, I want to tell you, when Fieger ran for governor, he was for social media. We dogged all the candidates out. We chased them all around the state, and he got his message out. He wasn't scared to go into the den of the lions. And I remember we went with John Dingell and all the top Democrats were in Taylor. And when Jeff left that rally for Larry Owens, they was hollering Fieger time. So we knew what to do. We didn't have to have a Facebook or Instagram.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. And I'm not convinced about social media being that all powerful stuff, but Adolph is pretty creative genius in terms of messaging and public relations and getting attention, especially if you're not as funded as you need to be. It seems to me that if you did things creatively and you address issues creatively, for instance, if I had been running, notwithstanding the fact that Terry McAuliffe appears to have not been a very exciting candidate, maybe not even that well liked. He was the darling of the Democrats because he was their Democratic national chairman for a while. But every time I saw him on television, he looked tired to me versus that other guy who looked like a cross between, he looked a little like Lyndon Johnson, this Youngquist. He's got no lips or anything. But the fact is that Virginia always in these off-year elections goes for the other party, and the Democrats, nominate a rather insipid individual. But until and unless the Democrats just say this entire campaign is racist, there's no such thing as critical race theory. The idea that you're interested in education because you're attacking, you're not even educated, Youngquist. You don't even know what's taught in the schools. How are you telling parents what to do? Now we're about to have parents tell educators what books to burn. Okay, these people are really nutty people. We're descending into some otherworldly place, and the national media is covering these people like it's a legitimate argument they have that somehow Youngquist talked about education. He didn't talk about education. He talked about nonsense. He talked about critical race theory being taught in school, and he was lying. He talked about books that shouldn't be in school. He was lying. He was talked about, I guess, saying parents should have some input in schools. Since when don't parents have input in schools? But I think what he was really, the undercurrent of everything that he was trying to say was that the wrong people, the black people, the people who write books, the pseudo, the media elite or the liberals are having inroads into our education process. So we have to figure out a way to have a good old-fashioned book burning again. It's all about prejudice, but he appealed to it. That's what he did.
Scare Whitey.
Right for the prejudice. And he only won by a few thousand votes. The media isn't covering that either. He only won barely by the skin of his teeth.
Yeah. Can I just say, though, that, again, I want to bring some of this back to the fault of the media, because there are two points I want to make. In the whole discussion of critical race theory, we saw a lot of cameras being thrust in the faces of white Karens and their husbands, who are all named Ryan, I think, and asked, well, when should children learn about race, blah, blah, blah. Did you ever see them ask that of a black family and say, what do your children learn? What do you think your children should learn about race? And of course, black families have to have that conversation in the home a lot earlier than white families do. That's part of the
right out of the womb. We have that conversation.
Exactly.
And we got to deal with it every single day. There's no critical race theory. That is a false narrative that the media in this country has let these people run with it. There's no question. And the people that run with it are the ones that knowing that they're lying every day. Every time they open up their mouth, it's a lie.
Well, and that's the other point I want to make, because when you were talking about book burning, Jeff, the book that was in question, it was the subject of it was never named, but it was the subject of a late in the campaign ad by Youngman. And it was this mother talking about how my son had to read a book that really upset him and he had nightmares. And oh my gosh, I showed some of these passages to these state legislators and they turned red. It's like the book was beloved by Toni Morrison, a Nobel
Prize winning, right?
Yeah, no, Nobel Prize winning.
Nobel Prize winning.
Yeah, right. Not even a Pulitzer, the big N, not the big P. And this was AP English, which is taught in the senior year of high school for college-bound kids. In fact, all AP classes are technically college-level classes. So essentially, she's crying that her 17 or 18-year-old son is being upset by a book that is indisputably a masterpiece. And she's acting like he's some 7th grader who had to read Last Exit to Brooklyn or something, and it's like, come on, people. So that was such a lie. Anyway, you're right.
But we have Black parents who's upset because some of their kids had to read Huckleberry Finn in middle school, and because they didn't like some of the words.
Right.
I remember in the 7th grade at Clinton Junior High in Oak Park, we had to read out loud Huckleberry Finn. There's no question. And when the white students read it, and when it came to talking about the slave nigger Jim, they didn't want to say that word. But when I read it, I made everybody feel uncomfortable. The book, it's a book by Mark Twain that it shouldn't be burned. But you got Black parents want to get rid of the book. Anything by Richard Wright in Texas, they want to get rid of it. They don't want to talk about Rosa Parks. They don't want to talk about slavery. Their view of slavery, that these people was happy, that they had food, a shelter, and they had work. What more can you ask for?
Well,
in Texas, you've got revisionist history. I mean, they think JFK's still alive. So, Alan,
I was going to say that watching Showtime, The Circus did an episode on the Virginia race before the election, and one of the reporters said to Glenn Youngkin, because he was going around, they were showing him saying, my first day in office, I'm going to ban teaching of critical race theory, and she says to him, well, they don't teach critical race theory in Virginia. And he goes, yeah, I know. But he says, it's a theory. And, and it's really all about scaring whitey. And it's also really, it's about intimidating teachers into just teaching some of the very basics about slavery in this country, about just, post-slavery, what's happened here. And teachers are intimidated by that. They don't know what they can and can't teach.
Alan, didn't they want a opposing view on the Holocaust? Didn't they want it from the Nazis' point of view?
Right.
Yeah.
Down in Texas, a teacher said, well, I think we have to give an opposing view on the Holocaust. Like, hey, not so bad. If it would have been, it's like the Sarah Silverman joke where she says, my niece came home and said, Auntie Sarah, we learned about the 60 million Jews being killed in the Holocaust. And she says, I corrected her and said 6 million, because after all, 60 million would be unforgivable.
She's so great. I love Sarah Silverman. Yeah. All right.
Well, I imagine in Virginia now they're going to teach the Civil War as, one dude fought another dude, and then a bunch of dudes fought a bunch of dudes at Bull Run, and then they fought again at Bull Run, and then this guy went ahead and he surrendered to this other dude at Appomattox, and the war ended. It's literally coming down to that. But this idea, though, I want to get back to the Virginia election, and two things. One is this a referendum on the Hillary Clinton branch of the Democratic Party? I mean, here you've got McAuliffe, who's seen as an apparatchik of her, and really a lot of comparisons to how well she ran her campaign and the way he ran his campaign. And the other is this loss of the independent vote, especially white suburban women. How does that factor into Youngkin's victory? And then also, what does it bode for the rest of the country?
It's neither. You can't even tell me who the former governor is of Virginia right now, the present governor of Virginia, because they're insignificant. The news media, and that by that I mean CNN, whose viewership is down 71% since last year, and MSNBC have nothing else to talk about. So they had to cover this election like it's a World Series sporting event, which they do. The results were extremely close. Virginia, virtually as New Jersey, virtually always goes with the party not in power at the time. And the fact that that the Republican won in this case is not a harbinger, although it does, if you want to look at it, point up, a lot of the insipid nature of Democrats. But I mean, when you compare the vote, how many more people voted for Youngquist than voted for McAuliffe? A few thousand? I mean, that was pretty damn close. If you start motivating people, and I don't think anybody really was that motivated to go out for McAuliffe, I think McAuliffe would have kicked his ass in a real race where people were motivated to do something. But this was a rather insignificant off-year election that is relatively meaningless. And I don't think it's necessarily a harbinger unless nobody comes out in 2022 for the Democrats. If the Democrats act as badly as they traditionally act, as insipid as Democrats act, and as cowardly as they act, if they started acting like Republicans and started just like, doing things like Republicans would do, like getting rid of the filibuster and lynching Joe Manchin.
I agree.
Things would
send him back to where he came from.
They're just Weasley. They're Weasley. They'll run away from you. If they had, I'm serious. If the Republicans had a Jeff Fieger in the Republican Party, I'd be president. But the Democrats are such Weasley mice. I mean, they don't even know. They couldn't, isn't this true, Adolph? They couldn't wait to get rid of me, right?
There's no question about it.
They couldn't wait to get rid of me.
And they all went and voted for England.
Right.
That's why they was mad. They was mad that when we stood up on that Wednesday morning and claimed victory, it was a nightmare for them. But you know what? The Republicans, when they put their agenda on the table, they run the table with it. There's no question about it. You talk to a Democrat and say, okay, we want to talk about reparations. Shh, don't say anything. We can't talk about reparations. We can't talk about that. And
what is the Republican agenda? Does anybody know? Because as far as
take us back to Reconstruction. Jim Crow.
Exactly like every totalitarian agenda, to get people to mindlessly vote in mass against a perceived enemy. So they always have. We have terrorists. We declare war on terrorists. We declare war on drugs. We declare war on communists. There's got to be a boogeyman. The Republicans are great, and they never stop. They got one thing: critical race theory. Nobody knows what it is because it isn't anything. It's not taught, but they wouldn't stop talking about it.
Deeper on the police.
How stupid people are. If you just say one thing to people over and over and over again, Goebbels is right. Goebbels is right. The way the Nazis did it was right. That's how they got in power. People think they took over. They didn't. Hitler won the election. Just like Trump was doing. He didn't let go. He became chancellor, then never let go.
I have a more subtle version of that. I don't think they're saying the same thing over and over again. What they're doing is what Steve Bannon called flood the zone with shit. And you
But they don't talk about that much shit. They talk about one thing because their base is relatively ignorant, doesn't pay attention. Oh yeah, but critical race theory isn't an esoteric phrase. It means black people.
Right.
That's all it means. It means black people. That's all it means. If you started talking about getting guns in the hands of black people, you'd see how many people don't support the Second Amendment anymore.
It worked in California.
If you start a campaign on arming black people to the hill, man, wait till you see those gun nuts go the other way.
Well, they did it in California.
Yeah, worked for the Black Panthers. So
Yeah,
you know what? It's interesting.
You saw the Black Panthers with guns. We can't let those people have guns. We can only have good, white people flying Confederate flags have guns.
It's interesting. I was reading somewhere where someone described Glenn Youngkin in Virginia as basically Donald Trump dressed as Jeb Bush. And I think what we're seeing here is that the Republicans saw the success of Trump, and now they're seeing that they need to sort of refine, take off the rough edges, put a new face on it, put somebody a little bit more physically fit, a little younger, someone who has the same ideology. If you could really say that Trump had any ideology, it was really just Trumpism. But I think we're going to see more. I mean, Glenn Youngkin was basically, as we say, the theme was scare Whitey, parents matter. And,
we seen the Republic. We saw the Ku Klux Klan go to Brooks Brothers and start wearing suits. So, and that's what they're doing. They redoing themselves. So, it's like Star Trek, the Borg. They adapt to whatever. You know what? The Proud Boys, they're not, they just an organization. They, a social organization. They remake themselves every single day. And the Democrats sit up there on their behinds and say, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't talk about these issues. Now, if they don't get it together, the coward of the county will be governor.
Well, we're in real trouble, Adolph, because we have legitimatized a armed invasion of the Capitol, and allowed most of the Republican elected officials to deny that circumstance ever existed. And you would have thought, I would have never believed that in this country there wouldn't be a national revulsion against any party that implicitly or explicitly supported an armed insurrection. And it is so clear that the Republicans elected officials right now in Washington, by denying the circumstances of January 6th implicitly, and some of them explicitly, have supported an armed insurrection against the United States. What future do you think we have? I mean, seriously, Cheney, who is one of the most radically conservative members of Congress, the daughter of Dick Cheney, who's primarily responsible for doing what has happened in the Middle East, the worst foreign policy excursion in the history of this country. She appears to be the only voice of reason. There's something terrible going on in this country. And so the news media is acting as if that's okay, that it's normal to not necessarily condemn the people who invaded the Capitol. What?
Yeah.
I mean,
if that was Black Lives Matter that invaded the Capitol, they would have been executed.
The social fabric you see can be torn very, very quickly. Very.
Well, Tucker Carlson has just released a 3-part series on the January 6th Capitol, and it's so slanted and it's so sanitized to make them look like they hardly did anything. And
it was just a rugby. It was a rugby match that went a little crazy.
Just Taurus gone wild.
Yeah.
And even I'll tell you how bad it is. Is that Geraldo Rivera, a Fox News correspondent or whatever, complained to Fox about the series, saying how fucked up it was, and so it tells you something.
Well, we've had the same reference twice to a Kenny Rogers song, so I'm going to throw another one in and talk about Lady. Governor Whitmer, how do you like that segue?
All right.
Should she be concerned about Tuesday's elections? I know Jeff mentioned James Craig. Is he doing a victory dance right now at the prospect that all he needs to show for himself is that capital letter R?
If he is, he's a fool, because
Michigan is not unlike Wisconsin. It's not unlike New Jersey. A Democrat can lose at any time because we have a strong streak of prejudice and racism in the state of Michigan. And Whitmer absolutely can lose, but her fate is tied solely to the ability of the Democrats nationally. Michigan goes as the national economy goes. We're just so dependent upon just a couple industries that if we're going fairly well and a Democratic administration is in power, it's likely the Democrat can win again. But Michigan is always in danger of electing somebody like Engler or worse. James Craig, I don't think has a chance, but there must be somebody else out there. They don't care. Nobody knew who Engler was when he ran against Blanchard. He's from Beale City or he's a Bowser from Beale City. Nobody had ever heard the man's name. He just had a Republican next to his name, right, Adolph?
Rick Snyder. Right. Another one.
Right.
Another one.
Rick Snyder had a lot of money.
Rick Snyder.
Well, you know what though? Rick Snyder had a resume, and he could stand up there and say, "I'm a genius businessman, and I can run." And the phrase in politics that drives me the craziest, besides "I am not a politician," is "we need to run blank like a business," which I always thought was stupid. It's like me saying
businesses are profit-making ventures.
Exactly. I mean, they're completely. It'd be like me saying, my dentist saying, "I'm going to run this office like Geoffrey Fieger's law firm." I mean, it's just like they're two different things. You shouldn't be trying to make one run like the other.
Well, Snyder
was a businessman.
Snyder referred to
he wasn't a very good
constituents.
If anybody ever saw his history, he wasn't good at all.
Yeah. Snyder referred to people as customers. They weren't constituents or citizens. They were customers. And
he said, "Hire me."
Yeah,
hire me. Yeah.
I'll say one thing about Engler. Engler was a professional politician. I don't think he ever had a real job outside of politics. And I remember being in the Lansing News Bureau.
Nor has he ever had a job since then on politics.
Yeah, he had had a job eating at buffets around the country.
Yeah.
Cleaning up.
No, he wasn't a real politician. He was thrown into that position and he became one. He really wasn't. When he ran against Blanchard, he was expecting to lose. Just a month before the election, according to the Detroit News, he was 20 points behind Blanchard.
Wow.
Okay, 20 points behind Blanchard. There's no reason for him to have won. And had he never won, you would have never heard of him again in life. You would go John Engler. Now, he won 3 terms solely because the Democrat in power, Clinton, was doing so well that Engler claimed responsibility for that in Michigan, which is another absurdity.
Okay.
So what should Whitmer be more concerned about, the election results on Tuesday or the White House response to it?
Both.
That's a good question.
Both.
White House response, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
She's tied to the White House. If they don't do better, she'll lose.
That's
and Biden doesn't have a vice president that can stand in for him because she's been MIA. You know, what was her purpose in Virginia? She couldn't get 5 people to go to the polls.
Well, I mean, that also begs
she's a
another
very,
question. I mean, is Biden going to run again?
Strident person.
I really hope he does
What?
not. Is he going to run again?
Who? Biden won't run again. Biden won't.
Yeah.
You mark my words. You can write this down right now. Write this down. Joe Biden will not run for president. You say Geoffrey Fieger said this on November the 5th, 2021. Joe Biden will not run for president in 2024. No chance in the world.
It's on social media. It's going to be there forever. So it's on. This is on social media, so it'll be there forever.
I hope you're right.
Well, good, but you can write it down. And the reason he won't run will be because of physical inability to do it. He has, and
it's a very hard.
Kamala.
It's widely.
Go. What'd you say?
I was going to say I don't think Kamala has much of a shot of.
She's
winning.
Not. She doesn't.
She's been a non-entity.
Produce empathy. She doesn't make people want to go with her. I mean, the reason that a person like Barack Obama could win the presidency is because white people looked at Barack Obama and liked him. White people don't look at Kamala Harris and like her, not because she's a bad person. She just is kind of a hard person, and she doesn't exude the empathy and the charismatic nature of Barack Obama.
Is at
so
her
she doesn't
best,
have a chance
in my
in
experience.
hell. If she was a Republican, though, she could win because they just vote for anybody who's a Republican. But as a Democrat, not a chance. But Joe
she
Biden
is at her best
run because of physical inability, and you should cover that more often. Nobody's talking about it, but Joe Biden's only 7 years older than me. Joe Biden, I think, I'm not speaking for myself, you tell me, he looks about 30 years older than me. He looks 30 years older than Donald Trump. And he doesn't look like Joe Biden used to look. Why?
Yeah.
I don't think he's mentally incompetent. I don't believe any of that Nikki Haley crap about mental incompetence, but he's clearly got a decreasing physical stamina as a result of ongoing physical problems. Most likely,
he's an old man.
What do they call it? No, it's atrial fibrillation. No, it's not.
I don't know what it is, but I mean, nobody lives forever.
It's atrial. Well, I do. It's atrial fibrillation. He's had it
okay.
For
Can I say
20 years.
one thing before you run away with this topic again? I think that Kamala Harris is at her absolute best when she was a senator, and she would be questioning some, miscreant ne'er-do-well in front of her. The Senate Judiciary Committee, because she was a prosecutor, right? That was the lefty shot against her. Kamala was a cop. She was a prosecutor. She knows how to question people. But you're right, Jeff. I don't think she doesn't have the cuddliness that even, a jerk like Donald Trump kind of sort of has. Some sick women seem to find him fatherly or something. They must have had very bad upbringings, but all I can say
I think we also don't have any sense, really. Maybe other people do.
A lot of people, like over 70 million people. If you can look at him and then just say a misogynist, how did that happen? How did people vote for that? Okay, it's psychology I cannot understand except race.
The people who grew up in terrible homes. Go ahead, Alan. You were saying something.
I was going to say that Kamala Harris has not given us any sense of really her role so far in this White House. It's like,
she's supposed to be on the border, but she
stopped. She dropped the ball in Texas. Yeah. Listen. She has not served as the hit person for Joe Biden that can go around the country and carry his message. Yeah. And she hadn't been able to do that.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Well, I mean, the other problem I think she's got is that she's not a Svengali like Dick Cheney, and so we can't really get a gauge of how she could be as the brains behind the operation, which could set her up for 2024.
It's too bad she doesn't have the energy of a Stacey Abrams, who know how to energize the voter base, who know how to carry the message.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so this is what the Democrats is dependent on to get this infrastructure bill passed. What role is she playing in that?
Harris was not that strong of a candidate as in the primary race, and that's why she eventually vanished. How she was sort of resurrected for the VP, for whatever the selection process was. There were a lot of check boxes,
right? So, Speaking of infrastructure, we've got our own infrastructure here with the Detroit City Council. Seems to be a bit of a mess. 2 empty seats from felony convictions, 2 members under FBI investigation. Janae Ayers, whose home was raided, ended up losing to Mary Waters, who's got a conviction for bribery. Are we going to see the same old on council?
Adolph?
Well, listen, I'm still wondering, why did the feds decide to start raiding people's houses 60 days before the election to throw dirt on folks? I thought that Janae Ayers might squeak in because people give her the benefit of the doubt. Because if you look at the alternatives, Mary Waters, who campaign manager and boyfriend is Sam Riddle. Need I say any more about what they're going to face on city council? Now they might be dealing with Mary at the table, but behind the scenes, he pulling the strings. People wanted folks that had experience, so we got 3 former state reps sitting there. Then we got one, Scott Benson, who went and got Steve Fishman as his attorney, and I said he must trying to let's make a deal. He might be off in 6 months. It's a mess. It's chaos. We'll see how it goes.
I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think the feds normally do not explain themselves, but you would think they would owe an explanation once the case plays out, why they did the raid just before they have a policy, sort of, I don't know if it's an unwritten policy, nothing 60 days within 60 days of an election. So they were about 63 days, which really doesn't make any difference. And so the question becomes, there were towing issues coming up, towing contracts coming up. Did they feel they needed to sort of raise a flag to stop these people from participating in the contract talks? Was there something on a wiretap where somebody said,
well, they was investigating Spivey for 3 years.
Right,
they let Gabe Leland sit up on the council for almost 3 years.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, we got to start raiding folks' places. Some of these people
normally you think about if they're doing it for political reasons, who's pulling their string. There's no reason politically for them to engage in that for political reasons, because the person who's going to win is also politically probably very similar to the person that they're investigating. So that doesn't make sense. That there's no secret agenda there. It doesn't make sense.
I don't think there's a secret agenda there. I think maybe there's either it's an insensitivity or there was some sense of urgency. Like I said, contracts were coming up for the towing, ordinances were being discussed. We don't know. Maybe somebody tipped off somebody and they said, hey, you better, get rid of your emails or throw out your laptop.
I'll tell you, but this whole thing plays into the morass of the way, like Adolph, you said, all you got to say, a code word for Black people is Detroit. So it plays into that narrative, that crap that's going on there. Who the hell are these people? But I don't think they're that much different than any other city council anywhere, any place. They're all in it for themselves. Can you imagine if you started looking at the people who are in local government? I used to go up to the state legislature and think that these people were from mental hospitals. And as you go down into the local government, they have no business being anywhere. They don't even have business. I don't think they have jobs. Like that lady in Macomb County. Who are these people?
And at one time, the mayor of Hazel Park was a part-time janitor at a junior high school, and he happened to be a Republican. What did he know about the city government?
Well, he knew enough about sewage, I'm sure. So speaking about job security,
democracy isn't all it's made up to be. You know, we should start that. You know how many police forces England has, the UK? You know how many police forces they have? One. Do you know how many police forces the state of Michigan, let alone this country, has? Hundreds of chiefs of police, deputy chiefs of police, police officers. I mean,
commanders, captains, lieutenants.
In the state of Michigan. Can you imagine the loss, the bureaucracy of imposing upon a population with 9 million people hundreds of police forces? For what?
None of which happened to be there at Cedar Village apparently last weekend when couches were flying out on fire. So speaking about job security, this is actually perhaps a very good weekend because the Lions are not playing. So therefore, they cannot lose. They are currently 0-8.
I want to talk about that. Would you guys please explain to me? I mean, it has to be that the Fords are imbeciles. It has to be that. And of course it was. William Clay Ford was an imbecile. I mean, and the fish rots from the head down. It's crystal clear about that because other franchises don't have this happening. But they went out. What's wrong with them now? They didn't have that bad a team last year. Who's this new regime they brought in to make them worse than ever before? Who did this?
Well, they had Jim Caldwell, and they ran Jim Caldwell out of town because he was only 9-7.
Exactly.
10-6.
The last coach he had because he happened to be black. But the truth of the matter is, who is this guy? I never heard of him, their head coach. I guess he was a tight end for the Lions. Where did they find him? How did they think he and then they went and they got that Matt Patricia and he did nothing? How did they keep? You'd think by accident you'd find somebody who knew what they were doing.
A former Lion player told me Detroit is a place where football players and coaches come to die.
That's true, Adolph, but who is, I mean, even by accident, you'd get a good person by accident. So there has to be somebody who's doing this. You can't have it this bad all the time for this long, unless there is truly imbeciles doing something. Because otherwise, nothing explains it. I understand the ownership is terrible. And remember, we're not allowed to criticize the ownership because we're Detroit and the ownership is the Ford Motor Company, at least the dumb brother of the Ford Motor Company. Okay?
All right,
okay. There are football teams. But they're truly imbeciles, truly incompetent, truly. And how they get, do you understand they can run that business because of television revenue without not having one person in the stand? They don't care about having people in the stands. It's an annuity based on the television revenue. They don't need people. It's an entirely television created thing. And that's the business they're in. But the people who are running the Detroit Football Club, Detroit football team, I just want somebody who really knows to explain why, even by accident, they couldn't, at some point in my lifetime, have found somebody who could do a good job. Does anybody have an explanation for that?
No
We don't.
explanation.
Well, we
I-
really
I-
have to get to the schmucks because
Why
we're
not?
out of time.
I
All I
just
know
want to
is-
say,
Yeah.
yeah, I find myself watching the Lions rooting for the other team to run the score up as high as they can possibly make it. So,
I mean, all I know is this could be history making because the Lions have gone 0-16, but they could literally become the first team to go 0-17 because the NFL added another game.
Wow.
So stay tuned to that. Well,
Dubious
we are
achievement.
at that point in our show where we are going to be going now to.
And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Okay, so why are you looking in there? 'Cause
All
you'll
right,
be
I
on
don't
media.
know who's left to Schmuck eyes because we've had quite a few indictments. But
we've shit on everybody.
who'd like
Well,
to
my
go?
schmuck of the week, University of Michigan and Jim Harbaugh. Any place else, he would have been gone, long gone. And for whatever reason, they stick with this guy through thick and thin. Can't win the big games. It's just ridiculous. And if this was anybody else, they would have shipped him out on a rail long time ago.
I agree. Then that's a nice segue from all the talk about the Lions coaches. So there you go.
Nancy.
Mine is, and I hope I'm not painting with too broad a brush here, the entirety of the Michigan GOP, which has been clamoring and yelling and caterwauling for the last year about the integrity of Michigan elections and did not send even one observer / challenger to the absentee voting count at the TCF Center. This was a rare occasion when I can get 100% behind a Charlie LaDuff column, but he's absolutely right about this. If you care about elections, you got to care about all the elections, not just the ones that your guys are running in. So that was they just all have to stand up and take it from me. So there you go.
Oh my goodness, Alan.
I'm going to go with an obvious Joe Manchin. I mean, who the guy, first of all, is just a crook. I mean, he's so connected to the coal industry. They say he's made, since he was elected senator in 2010, he's made like $4.5 million. He has he has an arm's length relationship to the coal mines that his son is operating, but he's still making money. And here he is trying to sabotage legislation that would, for cleaner energy. I think it's just and just screwing up everything. I mean, the Democrats have to come to the realization they really don't have 50. They don't have a majority, and they need to work on getting a true majority.
Can they put somebody on that stupid houseboat of his to get it, like some incriminating photographs of him or something? I mean, they have to exist and just like get him in line. I mean, the idea that the entire party is bowing down to him and that nutcase Kristen Sinema over this just absolutely chaps my ass. But we've already been over that. So
I think, Nancy, that people have taken those photos and they're violently ill. So therefore, they couldn't really publish them. So, Jeff, who's your schmuck of the week?
Collectively, I always consider the Republican Party as a whole to be schmucks of the week.
Okay. All right. Succinct and easy to then go ahead and map. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to go for a subgroup of what you said, Jeff. My schmucks of the week are the Republicans on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. For thus far dragging their heels on the nomination of Emory University professor and expert on the Holocaust, Deborah Lipstadt, who is up for nomination by the Biden administration to be special envoy to monitor and control anti-Semitism, which is an ambassadorial position. They're blocking it so far because they've gone back to her Twitter feed and seen that she said some not nice things about other Senate Republican senators or Republican senators, and especially Jim Risch, the ranking Senate member on the committee from Idaho, says, we'll have to get to the bottom of this. There's just a lot of tweets. I thought
you were going to say too Jewish.
Yeah.
So apparently, while Michigan might have gotten its first snowflakes falling this week, apparently there's quite a few more on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
So they then are my schmucks of the week.
All right.
Which brings us to the end of our show. I want to thank Adolph Mongo, Geoffrey Fieger, Nancy, as always, and Alan. And Alan, as always, you get the last word.
Drive home safely.
Thank you, everyone.
The week that was on Deadline Detroit is made possible in part by Lynette's Shrimp House located in Highland Park. It's Metro Detroit's premier destination serving juicy fried shrimp, fish, and wings, alongside soul food sides and new additions to the menu like turkey tacos and desserts. Located at 13548 Woodward in Highland Park, just north off the Davidson, Lynette's is open for takeaway. Call now, get some Lynette's.